child is looking for examples of pulleys within the story as Noah's telling his grandchildren about his experiences and the ark and the flood and all of that.
Okay. When you read a story like that and you come over here and you draw a picture of the animals in the story, you're making multiple connections to that story. So the goal of this isn't that they have to know what was the name of Noah's grandchildren. It was just Noah had grandchildren, but more here's what we're trying to pull from this, but we're making multiple connections in the brain. Now you have a teacher tip in here. So this all comes in one book, just like Adventures in Creation. Everything is contained in one book. Teacher guide, student book, answer keys, everything that's needed is there. So and it's the same with science. Some people will be like, well, let's just study science and then we'll get a Bible curriculum. No, science is a discovery of his creation.
They need to draw water up from the well, and so they use the pulley, and it illustrates how it makes it easier. And the children are talking about how their papa knows how to get a big job done.
Good morning, everybody. Hope you're having a good morning. Hey, I am here with author Carrie Lindquist. For anyone who doesn't know, Carrie is also my daughter. See the resemblance? And so we're going to talk about Adventures in Creation, Adventures in the Physical World today. Okay, so you started with Adventures in Creation, Book 1. And tell us a little bit about the overall series, like why the series?
That series, the why behind it was, I was on a group tour of Yellowstone National Park, and the guy was talking about all of these amazing things and features and how all the systems work together. And I was on that bus like, oh my goodness, this is such an amazing view of my creator and the design. And I looked around and everyone was like, that's cool information. And I started thinking, what would it have been like for me, because science was not my favorite subject as a kid, what would it have been like if I had been able to see that in science as a kid and experience that all the way up? And so that was kind of the inspiration behind that, of I wanted to give my sons that view of creation. When I was a kid, science was just like, it's boring facts. I'd rather study history. And now and now it's like, this is an amazing view. I can understand God better as I see these things. And I wanted to give that to my kids in a really fun and interactive way. And so that's kind of how it started, and then it developed into Adventures in Creation.
Yeah, so this is actually, it's very popular. This would be designed for a first grader, ideally. But we have people that are actually using it, second, third. Even I've had some fourth grade, but they supplement a little bit and add to it. But because of the hands-on activities in that,
you can really make it what you want and flex it to however will fit the student. Yeah.
Okay, so this was book 1. Now, in the series, how many books will there be?
That's an interesting question. He says 6.
7.
Oh, now we're up to 7?
But we have kindergarten. We have a kindergarten, first, second, and third. You're working on a K and third. So there's 2 more. And then it only makes sense that we go to 4th, 5th, and 6th.
He keeps increasing it.
One bite. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So Adventures in the Physical World. I had this thing all set up, so I was going to be able to do a camera preview and everything.
Sabotage. We've been sabotaged.
Yep. When they found out what was going on, I think IT got involved, jammed the system. This is how top secret things are around here.
We're outlaws right now.
Yeah. I've locked the door. I have one of my other kids standing with a gun outside the door protecting us. So, a little dramatic maybe. It's not quite that bad. Okay. So, Adventures in the Physical World. Now, Adventures in Creation covers what?
That one goes through the days of creation and covers those topically. So each day of creation has about 5-6 weeks that they'll study the atmosphere or animals, mankind, that type of thing. Adventures in the Physical World is the physical sciences. So you're looking at physics and chemistry, meteorology, geology, those types of sciences. So they're studying energy and matter and motion and rocks and weather, all of that fun stuff.
So would this kind of be the equivalent of a general science?
Yes.
Okay. So Adventures in Creation, general science, if you're thinking picture. And what's amazing though is the concepts that you taught for a first grader. We have Delaney, Science with Delaney, who's done all the videos. And I got a kick out of watching it because there were some pretty cool experiments there.
They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, and like the pollen one, that you see how easy they're carrying pollen from flower to flower. So there's some of those experiments that I think even higher level courses miss that you get from just seeing sticky gauze.
And it brings it to life then when you go and you see a bumblebee in the yard and their legs are just covered in those balls of pollen. Well, then you know how easy they got there and why they're there.
Okay, so Adventures in the Physical World. Let's see. Table of contents. There you go. Preview it.
Pause it.
Table of contents. The physical world, potential and kinetic energy, mechanical energy, friction and force, pulleys, gears, levers, chemical energy, matter, magnets, electrical energy, thermal energy, light energy, nuclear energy, the sun, moon, stars, constellations, solar system 1, solar system 2, intro to meteorology, weather instruments, the atmosphere, clouds 1, 2, the water cycle, seasons, intro to geology, earthquakes, mountains, volcanoes, igneous rocks,
sedimentary rocks, and
metamorphic
metamorphic
rocks,
rocks.
fossils, and conclusions. So there's some pretty weighty stuff for a second grader. So talk about that a little bit.
So it's designed as an introduction to these topics. I found with my second grader, he asked a lot of big questions that we were kind of diving into these topics. And so the goal was to create an introduction to these topics and make it simple enough that you can understand it for that age range. And my kindergartner and my second grade work on activities kind of together. And so we've gauged it to be understandable for about that level.
So next to the press is a house that sat vacant for quite a while. And a new family has bought that, and they've really done a nice job cleaning it up. But it appears that they've also bought dirt bikes for their whole family. And so right outside of our studio now is a dirt bike trail. So if you hear dirt bikes running, that's our neighbors. Okay. So course description, we're talking physical science, hands-on investigations, those are the experiments, biblically inspired stories. Okay, so the last Adventures in Creation kind of did a living story approach to Adam and Eve and their children, maybe some discussions that they would have had. Sometimes the issues come up about the living story and adding liberties into that story a little bit. Could you discuss that?
So I love historical and biblical fiction. I have since I was a kid. And I still do as an adult for the way that it can bring to life a story in the Bible. Sight and Sound Theater is just one of my favorites. And sometimes in watching a performance, you realize there was a lot more to that story than I actually remember, or little details that you don't just catch reading the text. And as a kid, those adventures always drew me to go back and read in the Bible and find out what was truth, what was fiction, what happened, and really dive into those details. And so that's something that I wanted to incorporate into this course to also inspire students to go back to the Bible, to read through, to see people as real people and God working in their lives. And also, our kids are going to encounter fiction in all areas of their life, from church and media, all of the biblical, historical fiction type stories. There's so much of that. And I wanted to use this as an opportunity as well to begin having those discussions and be able to teach, this is what happened in the Bible, this is how we go back and we see what happened in the Bible, and then we have the historical biblical fiction that we can talk about what may have what would have life looked like, what might have been conversations they may have had, what things might they have experienced, just to kind of bring those stories in that text to life at that age.
Okay, so in taking liberty, like we have Sight and Sound Theater located in Branson, and they always say in the beginning, like, we hold to the scriptural context, right? That there was Adam and Eve, and that they had children, and even though we may not always like Cain because of what he did to Abel, he was a son of Adam and Eve, and he would have been at the table or at the fire or whatever talking about what Adam and Eve experienced when they walked with God in the cool of the night. And so just helping kids to realize Adam and Eve are real people just like us, and they had conversations just like us, and we can give people more personality than just that Adam and Eve, the fall type.
Yeah.
They were real people who messed up.
And I think there's so many valuable lessons in that. Growing up, you always said, I wish I could take choices and put them into a bottle so that we could see choices and then see the consequences of those choices. And that is a discussion in Cain's life of, he did start as a child, and at some point he made choices that put him on a path that I would imagine he didn't intend to go down. And Adventures in Creation talks about that a little bit in the last lesson, where we all have choices to make, and we have to make those decisions daily, and they all add up over time.
Right. So, but it doesn't, in the level Adventures in Creation where it talks Adam and Eve and their family, that's all, they would be a fairly young family. It doesn't get into
they're a very young family, and I leave a lot of that discretion to the parent of how deep you want to go into that conversation. It's all kept very generalized, but there is throughout the course the discussion of our choices, from Adam and Eve choices, and then all through history we all have those choices to make.
And the effects, yeah. Okay, so then this level goes to Noah and his family.
Yep, it's set after the flood with his grandchildren. So in this level, it's learning, it ties into the lesson, and they're going about daily activities, so maybe drawing up water from the well, and we're talking about pulleys in the lesson. And so the child is looking for examples of pulleys within the story as Noah's telling his grandchildren about his experiences and the ark and the flood and all of that.
Okay. Which is definitely something. I mean, in the Charlotte Mason method, we would call them living stories, or a lot of history books that we had when you guys were growing up were actually like told from two boys' perspective that would follow the Union Army and see things and experience things, and they'd go and talk to John Lee, and even though they weren't, they took liberty, the facts that remained were solid, but there was just that imagination standpoint of there was a lot going on in the world.
Right, and they're all set apart of, let's imagine what this may have looked like, let's imagine what may have happened, and then you can have further conversation.
Okay. The hands-on investigations, so just address those.
So those are designed to be very easy to do with minimal planning. In this one, the materials list is a lot like Adventures in Creation, so a lot of the materials are going to be things that you already have on hand. There's a few exceptions to that. You may need to order magnets, a solar system kit, and some gears, but there's just those exceptions really in that course. I've been a work-at-home mom full-time and part-time for the last 3 years, and so keeping things very simple and easy to plan, and knowing that when I open up school, the materials are just going to be in my kitchen or around the house is really important to me. So I craft the hands-on activities with that in mind.
Okay, so the objectives: we explore energy, force, motion, simple machines, matter, astronomy, meteorology, and geology. Pretty comprehensive. Discover: science teaches many lessons about God and our relationship with Him. Learn through hands-on exploration and experimentation, which we just talked about. Compile a science notebook as students document their discoveries and share what they've learned. So what about the science notebook?
So on day 3, the student will put together a page. In this level, it usually asks like a reflective question of, what do you want to remember about machines that we learned this week? And that's to help the student start to personalize and own the knowledge. And then there's usually some kind of activity that they'll put together, something of what they've learned through the week, and then that goes into a notebook. When my boys started school, one of their favorite things, we would pull out the pages, stick them into a notebook, and then at dinner they would take it to my husband and be like, Dad, look what we learned today. And that was so fun and exciting for them. So that is what's behind the science notebook of this course, is they can put all of that material into a notebook, and then when grandparents come over or friends, they can be like, look, this is something really cool that I learned this week in science.
Awesome. Okay, so this is 3 days a week?
Yep.
Okay. So we have a 3-day-a-week course, a note from you that explains, and then there's a couple of components in the course. The Imagine That, that's the biblical
Inspired stories.
Inspired stories. Discussion starters.
So those are additional questions or activity ideas that you can do throughout the week if you wanted with your student to enhance their learning.
Okay, let's memorize.
Those are scripture verses that tie into the week's theme or lesson.
Okay. Science notebook material list. And then, so on the weekly material list, flashlight.
Yep, so it'll show at the beginning of the week all of the materials that you need for the week, and then on each day, if you need a subset of those materials, it lists out what materials you actually need for that particular lesson.
Okay. We have some extra resources, the new weather book, astronomy book, Inside Noah's Ark for Kids, a couple of others that would be helpful to have. Not necessary, but recommended.
Recommended. You wouldn't need them, but if your child definitely would like to go deeper into a topic or you want to explore more as a family, they're helpful to have.
Okay. Then there is a, let's see, master materials list for every week that you can go and like, okay, week 4 we're going to need a drinking straw, a paper, a bouncy ball, and a Matchbox car.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty easy to go through the whole year and know exactly what's needed each week. But they seem fairly, week 9, water, drinking glass, ice cube tray, pot or pan.
Mm-hmm. They're kept very easy to accumulate and...
Okay, and so that goes through all 36 weeks. So this course is a 36-week, 1 full year course.
Mm-hmm.
Has the daily schedule. And it's set up with dots. So it's day dot 1, day dot 2, day dot 3 that they would do. And yeah, so essentially read and complete day 1, physical world, read and complete day 2, physical world, read and complete day 3. I mean, it's fairly straightforward as they're doing, and the subjects are grouped together.
Yep.
Okay, so they're doing, like week 5, they're working on pulleys. Week 6, they're doing gears. Week 7, they're doing levers.
Mm-hmm. And the setup, as far as the lessons during the week, is going to be the same as Adventures in Creation, where day 1 is kind of your overview of the topic. Day 2, they're going to experience the topic with a hands-on activity, and then day 3, they're going to share what they've learned through their science notebook.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so then we come to like day 1, the physical world, and they're learning.
Just the kind of like an introduction of this is what we're going to be talking about and learning about.
So here's the weekly materials list, what they need to gather for the week. Okay. And so this is chapter 1, is a little bit more of an introduction.
Mm-hmm.
But then they do Imagine That, which is the inspiration. And what's really cool in this one is we actually hired an illustrator, right?
Yeah, and the illustrations are beautiful. They were beautiful in Adventures in Creation as well. And these are another step above it. They're just gorgeous.
I know you showed me a couple the other day.
I think they were from later in our preview. Or later in the... then our
yes, of
preview's
course.
going to go. Yeah.
Felt like there would be another illustrations that go with the stories. And so this, Imagine That, the biblical inspired stories, I'll just read a couple paragraphs. Papa, Gomer and Abby called breathlessly as they ran to their grandpa Noah. Their cousins Cush, Sarah, Elam, and Magog were running behind them. Noah was taking care of the animals in the field. He looked up as he smiled and chuckled. He knew his grandchildren were coming to listen to him tell the story of the world. Noah had already told them how God created the world, how God had made Adam and Eve, how they disobeyed God's directives. Noah had told his grandchildren how sin had broken the world and all about his parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. Now it was time to tell them the next part of history, Noah's story. And Noah took a deep breath. What an adventure it had been as he rubbed his face with his rough hands as he turned his face to grandchildren's smile. Hello, children. Are you ready to help me tend to the animals? Papa, we want to hear more history. Tell us your story, said Elam. Yes, please, the other echoed. All right, Noah answered. Let's work together and I'll tell you my story. It all started one day, ... The suspense.
The suspense. And in the beginning materials, it goes through where you can read Noah's full story, what children are mentioned in the genealogy and what ones are added in, and so you can also have that conversation.
So then the activity for that day, fill in the blank with the right sight word, share, ask, test. Science helps us
Ask questions,
test our ideas, and share what we've learned with others. Okay, and in our story, Noah was taking care of animals in the field. Draw a picture of the animals you imagined he was taking care of. Now, the one thing about a lot of masterbooks courses, and this course too, is they're very holistic. They're not just like, in the past when you were homeschooling, we had curriculums that would be like a paragraph that would say, we're going to learn about pulleys. This is a pulley. This is da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then it would say, what is this? And you write a pulley. And it didn't really cause your brain to make other connections. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you're used to that concept-driven curriculum model where it's just testing, quizzes, analysis, you're not necessarily using all parts of the brain. Mm-hmm. When you read a story like that and you come over here and you draw a picture of the animals in the story, you're making multiple connections to that story. Mm-hmm. So the goal of this isn't that they have to know what was the name of Noah's grandchildren. Mm-hmm. It was just Noah had grandchildren, but more mm-hmm. here's what we're trying to pull from this, but we're making multiple connections mm-hmm. in the brain.
Yeah.
Okay. Discussion starters. What is science? What is energy? And what were the names of Noah's sons?
You said that.
Yeah. Well,
and those topics are covered in the lesson of what's science and what's energy. So that first one is just kind of like your breakdown of
yes.
These are the topics.
And discussion starters. So this is a little bit different as well. Discussion causes me to not just have to memorize an answer, but actually formulate an answer to get back to you that's forming more connections, but mm-hmm. also showing, do I understand the material? So very quickly we can say, no, science is not truth. As Mr. Randy said, science is not truth. Science is the pursuit of truth. And truth, absolute truth, comes only from God. He is absolute truth, and His Word is absolute truth. Science is pursuit of truth. We see that every day when we hear a lawyer say, if you or someone you love has been injured by, that would be science in the pursuit of truth.
And those discussion centers are so much fun because you never know what your kid is going to pull out of the lesson and how they're going to phrase it. And so you can have so many fun conversations as well with that, depending on where they take it and how you then dive deeper into it.
Okay. Day 2 is the experience. They're going to go on an energy expedition. Remember what energy is. It means something that has potential or ability to do work. There are many types of work energy you can do. Energy helps us move, cook our food, light up the room, keep us warm, cool, move from place to place, much more. Energy all around us. And so they're walking around the house looking for things that
are using energy.
Okay, and then how many examples of energy did you find on your energy expedition? Were you surprised by all the kinds of energy, all the kinds of work energy does around us? Let's write down a few of the things that we found that use energy. I think another thing about this style is if you're not somewhat engaged, and especially in lower elementary, I think you have to be fairly engaged. If you're not, these lessons aren't going to take you an hour,
No.
but they are going to take you a little bit of focus. We're going to have to kind of just look at this and say, okay, let's walk around the house and help them find it. I think that's kind of a key, is a little bit of time. It's not going to be overwhelming like some curriculums, but you do have to invest a little bit.
Invest a little bit while they're making their connections, and then it's amazing to me as we then go on about life, what other connections my sons come up and they're like, oh, we talked about this and this is that, and I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that you took that away.
Yeah. Okay, so then I come to day 3. Now you have a teacher tip in here. So this all comes in one book, just like Adventures in Creation. Everything is contained in one book. Teacher guide, student book, answer keys, everything that's needed is there. So the teacher tip says, if applicable, your student may also create a cover for or decorate his or her science notebook. And it gives a recap. We learned a little bit about energy this week. Do you remember the energy? Then it ties it in. As we study physical science this year, we're going to see God's power, wisdom, and understanding on display. Just like Jeremiah 51:15 reminds us, he made the earth by his power, he founded the world by his wisdom, and he stretched out the heavens by his understanding. Science helps us ask questions, test our ideas, share what we've learned with others. As we explore the physical world, we are going to create a science notebook. And so now then it gives in a little bit about what they're to do in the science notebook. Something that's a hallmark of Master Books, right? Our mission statement is ink on paper to impact eternity. All of our curriculum has a faith builder guarantee. So if the faith of your child doesn't grow when you use this curriculum, we'll give you your money back. And we do that because as you're studying science, and then you look at a scripture that says he made the earth by his power, he founded the world by his wisdom, and he stretched out the heavens by his understanding. So when I can't understand something, that's because he's greater than me, he's bigger than me, and we're trying to discover new truths about him through his creation. See, as we begin approaching all knowledge through that worldview, our faith gets interwoven into who he is and the character of who he is. Okay, so sometimes people would ask, why don't you have Bible curriculum? And it's because we have more Bible in most of our subjects than a lot. Because a lot of people will do math. Math is math. We can teach 2 + 2 = 4. We'll put a Bible verse at the bottom. We'll call it Christian. But when you actually take math and say math is the language that God uses to bring order to the universe, and when we study math and learn consistency of math, we learn about the consistency of God. And we can trust the rules of math the same way we can trust the one who created math, the creator.
It makes math a whole new field to explore.
Yeah, and it's the same with science. Some people will be like, well, let's just study science and then we'll get a Bible curriculum. No, science is a discovery of his creation.
Yeah.
Okay, teacher tip, hand-on motions, great way to understand, student memorize. You can use ideas below or develop your own motions. And so they're actually doing memory. A
memory verse for Jeremiah.
So for each of the words he made, make your hands in a fist, one on the bottom, one on the top. Tap the fist on top. Earth, put your fingers together to form a circle with your hands. Power, show your muscles. World, put your fingers together to form a circle with your hands. Wisdom, tap the side of your head. Stretched out, pretend to stretch something apart with your hands. Understanding, tap the side of your head. Again, it's a very holistic approach. It's not just read the paragraph, write the words, which is the base model of learning. It's actually moving it up so that you're doing more and creating more connections. You have the discussion and recall, but you're not actually doing a test per se. It's more, do you feel that they got what you just talked about? And second grade could be a little hit or miss.
It can be, for sure.
If you're a boy like me. Okay, is this part of...
So this is their science notebook page. So in this one, a lot of the notebooks will be what do you want to remember, or what was something that you found amazing about the topic this week, just to kind of get them to think about it and pull something away from their knowledge that they want to remember, not just saying this is what I want you to remember, but what did you find amazing about energy this week?
And then they would put this maybe in a 3-ring binder
Yep.
of their own?
Yep.
Okay. Draw a picture of something that uses energy. And so that's the week. And then they learn about potential and kinetic energy, which, like I say, I think one of your strengths is taking very complex topics and reducing them to a very understandable.
Mm-hmm.
So, potential kinetic energy, I think even moms are going to see when you have a course like this, sometimes science can be intimidating.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that I really like going up to 6th grade with this is that if you're doing this with your students, and you come to the high school levels where you're talking about kinetic energy and potential energy, you feel fairly confident because you've already been introduced to it and it wasn't that complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you boil it down, it's not as complicated to this level for sure.
Yeah, and it's a gift. I think you got that gift from me. But
yeah.
complicated things into simple ideas that stick is one of the hallmarks of the way I like to teach. And I think that sometimes we think, well, we've got to teach a whole book. It has to be thick and complicated. Unless our children are on the verge of tears, it just must not be good enough. And that's not the way we learn as adults.
No.
If I'm at the point of frustration about learning, my brain is in such a bad state. I have such a bad brain that it doesn't help.
No.
The more I can stay in a good brain place, the better off I am. Okay.
Yeah. And one thing in this lesson that was fun with my own kids is after they're my guinea pigs, so they get to do it before it looks all pretty. And it was several weeks after we had done this lesson, and one of my sons was like, "Oh, well, this is using kinetic energy over here, Mom. Isn't that amazing?" And it's just fun then to see the connections that they get to make.
So a simple example, I think this is kinetic energy.
Potentially and kinetic, yep. They build a ramp and they set a matchbox car at the top and talk about whether there's potential or kinetic energy at that point, and then they'll give it a little push and it goes down the ramp, and they'll talk about the energy type at that point as well.
Okay, and then okay, so the first lesson of this week, we talked about a rock sitting atop a hill. It reminds me of a rock in the Bible. This rock, also called a stone. It was a very large stone that sealed the tomb after Jesus died on the cross for us. His body was placed in the tomb, and this large stone was put in front of the entrance. But Jesus didn't stay there. He came alive again, conquered sin and death. Let's read from Matthew 28, 1-10. Listen carefully. Can you find examples of kinetic energy in the verse? And then it gives the verse of the day the stone was rolled away. Wow, there sure was some kinetic energy when the angel rolled the stone away. Mary and Magdalene also, it is Mary and Mary Magdalene?
Yeah.
Mary and Mary?
Mary, Mary.
Okay. Also used kinetic energy as they hurried from the tomb to share the wonderful news with Jesus' disciples. It's time for you to share what you've learned this week too. Let's answer the questions and draw a picture of something with potential energy and something with kinetic energy. Add the next page to your science notebook. So you see, like, even learning about something like kinetic energy and potential energy and then bringing it into a Bible story like the stone being rolled away.
There's a lot of observational science in this, and then it was amazing to me. Of all the fields of science, physical science was my least favorite as a kid. I never saw the point in it. And so coming into it now from the adult perspective and a biblical perspective, it was amazing to me how many lessons there are in that. One of the weeks it talks about magnets, and you look at magnets and they're drawn to things and they draw things to them. Well, our hearts are drawn to things too, and things draw our hearts towards it. And so when you look at a magnet, that's a reminder, like, what is my heart being drawn to? What is drawing my heart? Is it a godly thing? Is it an ungodly thing? There's a lot of really cool things in physical science and a lot of lessons that we can pull for biblical truth.
Here's another example. So this is force and friction that they're coming from, and they learn the scripture, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you are, Joshua 1:9. And so they have kind of the activities, the hand science to learn a scripture verse. And
that when it's talking about there's force and there's friction, and sometimes in our life when God calls us to something, there's friction against that, and we have to be strong and courageous to overcome that with what we know God has called us to do.
Yeah. Here's another example of a pulley. It explains what a pulley can do, and then it goes into Noah explaining how they need to draw water up from the well, and so they use the pulley, and it illustrates how it makes it easier. And the children are talking about how their papa knows how to get a big job done and make it easier to do. Interesting. Okay, so I think somebody had asked if there was copy work. Like in this one, they're actually completing. They're completing a dot, and then a pulley is a simple machine. The copy work. I know sometimes people. I think. Let's say this right. I don't think everybody fully understands the value of copy work or the frustration that students may have with copy work. Mm-hmm. Copy work is intense, especially for a second grader, because you're actually looking at a word, remembering it, then having to write it. Mm-hmm. And so the brain is actually having to memorize the words to bring it over to the paper. Plus you're using motor skills, which is tying in other parts of the brain. So copy work isn't just this twaddle, busy work of my kid's going to do copy work. It's actually brain exercise. Mm-hmm. It's much more complex than we'll just copy that because we didn't know what else to do. it actually, a pulley is a simple machine, something you want them to know. Mm-hmm. And so by doing that, that's actually making multiple connections.
Intentionality there.
Intention, yes, that's a good word. Good word. Okay, then the experiment for that is 2 spools of 3/8 ribbon, pencil, solo cup, hole punch, water or rocks to fill the cup. And so they actually go through and do an experiment.
They design their own little pulley with a cup and some ribbon, and that's a lot of fun. My kids were entertained with that for a long time.
Yeah, and ties it into the book of Psalms, and the Bible often talks about God's care through us through poetry and word images. He says, He lifted me out of a slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on rock and gave me a firm place to stand. Cool. And that also is the scripture verse. So the scripture verse, He lifted me out of a slimy pit, mud and mire. And so you can see this is what the concept. Now this isn't overwhelming for the students. So they're not going to get bogged down because they had to read pages and pages of something. Again, it just requires a little bit of focus.
A little bit of direction and focus.
To make sure that they're kind of gaining it. But we're talking a very short amount of time and keeping the frustration level of the student. Carrie has 2 boys. They have an attention span of their papa's, mine. And so she has to make it so that it's hit and run. This is what we're learning about. We're learning about pulleys, and let's play with a pulley.
Yeah.
And let's get out of here before they lose interest, because the moment they lose interest, then it just becomes a fight.
Yeah.
Good. Do you have anything else?
I don't think so.
Let's see. So right now these are in the beta version, or with the beta test group. I think they are almost done tonight with that. And then it goes back to the designers for final corrections. And the word is it should be out to printer the end of this week, beginning of next week. When that happens, we will, once the approvals come in, so probably within 2 weeks, the digital copies will be available at masterbooks.com. And you'll be able to see more of a preview that you could look at than the one I just gave.
I think someone had asked earlier if you can use it in different grades, and this one is also very flexible that way. The important thing to remember if you're going to use it with a younger student is that there are a lot of abstract concepts. So if your student isn't at that point of abstract understanding, Adventures in Creation would be a better fit.
Okay.
Until they are.
Okay. Easier to go up a grade than to kind of come down.
For this one, just because of the abstract.
Okay.
If your student's got the abstract thing covered, then you definitely can.
Yeah, and when you say the abstract thing, what would an example be?
Like energy. It's not something that they can necessarily hold on to or see as easily as a dog in
Right.
Adventures in Creation. It's something they kind of have to understand. There's an element to it that we can't really see. So.
And as students are developing at younger levels, sometimes that can be challenged. Another way to think of abstract would be like concrete thinking is 2 plus 2 equals 4. 2 plus 2 equals 4. But if you did 2 plus x equals 4, what is x? That's abstract because now you're having to try to work it back into the problem.
Right.
So, okay, good. Well, I'm excited by this. I think this is going to be fantastic. Now we also have God's Design for Heaven and Earth coming out fairly quick too. So we have two options. Masterbooks is eclectic. What that means is we have multiple solutions. Some publishers publish books that are very interwoven, your math, your language, your science, your social studies, they move up another grade. Well, we are a publisher that has series. So we have math lessons for a living education, language lessons for a living education. We have America's Story. We have the biographies of the Revolution. Those are two different approaches in two different ways of looking at time periods. We have multiple language solutions. Writing Strands overlaps with language lessons. They're two different series. They have two different approaches. So what I'm excited by this is it's a very, it's got a Charlotte Mason influence to it, but I think it's more of an applied science where you're learning concepts, but you're applying the model and going there as opposed to just a memorization.
It's very applied, and for these two levels, very relational because we get to do it together, and it's also funny. My kids will listen, and then one lesson talked about anger, and when I had an angry moment, my son was like, "Mom, are you being a volcano right now?" And so we get to have those. They get to tie it in, and all hold each other accountable as well.
Yes.